Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and if you're on a budget, an iPhone might not seem like a good idea, and for good reason. They're expensive. However, the iPhone 5 and 5C are some of the best value phones you can buy for your money, and in this video, we're going to discuss why. Alright, so as you know, the iPhone 5 and 5C are both very similar, which is why I'm kind of talking about both of them in this video. The iPhone 5 was released in 2012, while the iPhone 5C was released in 2013, and the only real difference is the design. Which one you go for really depends on your preference, and which one I guess you can find for a better price. If you want to see a full comparison of the two phones, there is one in the description down below that I did quite a few months back, but for the most part, they're very similar. So here's why I think that these phones are such a good value and why you should really buy them. The reason these things are amazing is because you can find them for about $50 on eBay if you look hard enough. And before you say, yeah, well, they're really old, so of course you can. These phones are still very good. They both have the A6 processor, which is decent, and 1GB of RAM, and can run up to iOS 10, which means at the moment they can run every single modern app. Basically, there's going to be a few here and there that aren't going to be able to run on the iPhone 5 and 5C, but for the most part, pretty much everything will. That's amazing. If you look right now, the minimum required version for most apps is iOS 9, which means next year will probably be iOS 10, and then the next year iOS 11. So that means you still have like 2 years of support with these phones. So if you're looking for something to last you a while, these could do the job without issue. And what's so great about these things is that they work so well on iOS 10. They're fast, they're fluid, and I really have very little complaints while I'm using them. If you compare them to, say, the iPhone 4S, which was the last phone before the iPhone 5 to get stuck on an old version, it's just mind-boggling. The speed is very good, which is surprising considering how old these phones are. You aren't going to find a better 5-year-old phone than the iPhone 5 and 5C. This is a fact. There is not one Android phone that will be better than the iPhone 5 and 5C that is 5 years old. Seriously, none of them. Why? Because they're all unsupported for a lot of things nowadays. Some Android fanboys might not like that, and it's not because they weren't better beforehand. They might have been, but now because they're so unsupported, I would consider them worse. Apple's very good with supporting phones for a really long time, and the iPhone 5 and 5C, I mean, they got 5 years. Now, if you're looking at a 5 or 5C, you might be thinking, well, why wouldn't I just go for the 5S? You can find a 5S for like $100 without too much difficulty, and well, that's actually a good point, and here's why I wouldn't buy the 5S. And if you're interested, I did do a whole video on why you shouldn't buy the 5S in the description down below. I didn't do it in the description, but the link will be there, so if you want to go see that, then you are totally welcome to. But when it comes to the iPhone 5S, just a quick summation, it's just a little bit too much considering what you get. It's a great price. It is a great price. It's worth the price. However, considering the iPhone SE is $200 used pretty easily, if you're willing to spend $100, just throw in that extra $100. It's really not that hard. But when you're taking the iPhone 5 or 5C, if you're going to go up to an iPhone SE from there, you're looking at more like $150, which is quite a big price range when you're talking for budget phones. So that's a big reason I think the 5 and 5C are actually in a lot of ways a better buy than the 5S. All you're really missing out on is the fingerprint sensor, which does suck. The fingerprint sensor is very nice, as well as iOS 11 support, which honestly, the 5S, if anything, is a little bit slower than the 5 on iOS 11. I'm going to do a full video on that eventually, but for now, I would say that if anything, the iPhone 5 is probably better on iOS 10 than the 5S is on iOS 11, believe it or not. You are missing out on a few features, but not a big deal. iOS 11 is very buggy and just kind of slow. In contrast, iOS 10 was always very fast, and it just worked for everything. So being on iOS 10 is a very good thing. Mind you, if you look hard enough, you will find a deal. Just a little while ago, I bought a 5S on iOS 10.2 for $45. In fact, I did a whole video on that. Now, why that is awesome is because the 5S is quite a bit faster on iOS 10, so if you can find one on iOS 10, then hey, that's also a good deal in a lot of ways. But when it comes to the iPhone 5 and 5C, what really appeals is that really low price point. Some of them do go up a little higher, $70, $60, $80, whatever. Just don't buy those ones. Keep looking. But for the most part, you can get like a great phone for so cheap. You can see some screenshots here I've taken from eBay. eBay is probably the best way to go when you're looking at used phone like this, just in my opinion. If you're not in a place where you have access to eBay, then I mean, I'm sorry, that's just what I use for most of my phone purchases. So when it comes down to it, everything on the iPhone 5 and 5C are very good. The camera is actually surprisingly decent. You can see some example footage here, and while it might not look great, you can still get some really nice shots with it. Now, what I would say is try not to go for the 8GB iPhone 5C. 16 gigs is probably fine for a budget phone, but 8 gigs, you're really starting to push it. If you take any pictures, any apps, whatever, you're gonna fill up super quick. So I wouldn't recommend going for the 8 gig, but that's fine. You can totally find a 16 gig for $50 if you look hard enough. Now, if you're not a huge fan of the screen size, I get it, but when it comes to the display, the resolution's nice. Everything on the screen will be nice and crisp. You won't be able to see pixels, so it's going to do you probably just fine. It might seem a little small, but for most people who are just looking for a budget phone, I don't see why this would be a deal breaker for them. If you want a budget big phone, I guess go to a budget Android, although I don't know if you're going to find one as good as these two for that price. These phones are awesome. They were very well made, and they hold up so well in 2017, and they will in 2018 too. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that you should buy these. If you're looking for a budget phone, these are amazing phones. If you can't afford an iPhone SE, this is your best next bet, in my opinion. I mean, and again, it is my opinion. Some people would say go for the 5S. I personally disagree. If you have a 5S, that's perfectly fine. It's probably doing you great, but I wouldn't recommend necessarily buying one anymore. The 5 and 5C, on the other hand, are going to be great. If you're still on the 4S for whatever reason and want a cheap phone, go to the 5 or 5C. I get lots of comments all the time asking me if they should get, an iPhone 4S or something because they have very little money. No. Boost it up like $20 and get the iPhone 5. You're gonna be so much happier with it. The 4S is brutal. You can't live on that thing anymore. I've tried. For the most part, I would just say that the 5 and 5C are great phones, and it's kind of sad that they're no longer supported, but if anything, that's a good thing, because the 5S has definitely slowed down on iOS 11, and if the 5 and 5C had iOS 11, they would be quite slow as well, I would bet. Now, these phones aren't perfect. You are going to experience slowdown, you're going to experience lag. That goes for pretty much any phone, and it definitely goes for these. That's something you're just going to have to live with, but if you can, then you're perfectly fine. Again, you're not going to be able to find a better phone for $50. $50. That's it. I'm just basically telling you to buy this phone if you're interested and need a very budget option. Yes, it's not the iPhone 10. It's not going to be nearly as good as that, and it's not going to be anything crazy, but it's going to do the job perfectly well, and I see these phones out in public all the time because they still work. They're good. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it or it was helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing if technology is your thing. What do you think of the iPhone 5 and 5C? Are they worth buying still in, late 2017? Or do you think the 5S or SE would just be worth the extra money? Thank you so much for watching. Social media will be in the description down below. Without further ado, I will see you all next time.